Hello again, this is Foghorn with another installment of Flight School Academics for this, the 1st of August 2950 or 2020. If you're stuck in the past, this presentation is part of an ongoing series of academics for the members of the Aurora Republic, the premier role-playing organization in Star Citizen. If you are new to the Aurora Republic or visiting for the first time, let me start by saying welcome. We're glad to have you with us and would love to hear more from you if you're interested in hearing more from us. We are a lawful good organization focused on roleplay exploration and social interaction and are currently active in recruiting on Spectrum and Discord. So first things first, happy birthday to Tiamo Lisa, who is 39 today for the at least 19th time. So congratulations and a happy birthday to you. Rules of engagement, we are streaming this video on Twitch, so remember that anything you say over the Discord can and will be immediately mocked out over across the internet, and that there is a broadcast delay. You probably want to deafen the Twitch chat so you can hear my voice in concert with the slides and not have to hear it echo twice, which would probably be a little bit confusing and maybe even a bit maddening. If you do have a question during any of this, feel free to unmute in the Discord. Just ask it in real time so that everybody can benefit from the education. Tonight, what are we going to do tonight? First, I'm going to get my slides going. Tonight, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of air traffic control in the real world, how it's done, and then how it might be role played in Star Citizen. So, without further ado, this will be hopefully fairly quick, and then we'll go into Alpha 3.10 and go play around and have some good time. So first, let's talk about air traffic control and how it's really done, specifically focusing on the comm and then who's talking to whom at what and what the sort of responsibilities are. So it'd help you guys if you want to roleplay comm in any of your in-game sessions and or any of your creative projects that you have going on. Okay, so there's a lot of variability that can happen here. There's a big logic sort of if-then tree that will modify what agencies are in charge or what agencies a pilot might have to talk to or any of these kind of things. And there's a very simple logic to it. But in the interest of time and not being here for hours talking about every little bit of what if and what could be, we're gonna take a look at it from an airline pilot in today's world. They're going to be departing from a controlled airfield, which means that they have an operating control tower, and that they have airport radar service area and ARSA available to them. That would be a Class C or in a really big airport, a Class B terminal control area airspace. They're going to fly on an instrument flight rules flight plan, an IFR flight plan. They're going cross country which simply means cross country simply means they're not coming back to the same base that they took off. They're going to a different airfield. And at their point of arrival, they're also going to be going into a controlled airfield with an airport radar service area. In other words, commercial airport type idea. So those are our basic assumptions for the example that I'm going to give, and then we'll talk about how we can tweak these things and use them for Star Citizen to add a little bit more realism in our role play. Okay, so the standard agencies and call signs, there's basically kind of 5 that I've broken these down into that you kind of have just a general idea of kind of what they are and what they do. The first one is called an automated terminal information service, and pretty much all airfields that have a tower are going to have one of these. And a lot of uncontrolled airports, if they have at least an FBO, a fixed base operator, they at least have an office of an attendant who's basically in charge of the airfield. They'll probably also have, they may have an ATIS, and the ATIS is just a looped recorded weather broadcast of well, it's not just weather, it's weather and any notices notices to airmen for that airfield, and it's updated every hour minimum, so every hour or more often if weather and situations are changing rapidly. So that's just like I said, it's recorded, usually at the top of the hour. By about 3 minutes after the hour, they'll have it posted. It's given an alphabet designator. So the first one of the day is information alpha. Then an hour later, if the weather's kind of standard all day long without huge changes, then an hour later they'll put up information bravo. An hour later they'll put up information Charlie. and it's just looped on a single radio frequency. So when you get in your airplane, you can just go to that frequency, listen for the 20 seconds or whatever it takes for the recording to loop through and give you all of the current, both weather observation, weather forecast, and if there's any notices to airmen that are worth putting on to the ATIS for that airfield, such as runways are closed. A certain runway might be closed, certain taxiways might be closed. Those kind of things that a pilot might need. Last chance for you to keep from screwing up and going out and trying to take off on a runway that's closed. So, clearance delivery in the big busy airports, depending on traffic at the airport at that time, a lot of times clearance delivery will be given by the ground controller over his ground control frequency. So a lot of times they'll combine that. So if it's a big busy airport, one of these big commercial airports, the only time traffic gets low enough to that it might be in the middle of the night. Other than that, they will actually have a second person that'll be on their own separate frequency called clearance delivery. And their sole job is that before you start up in your airliner is for you to take off is to contact clearance delivery, and they just read the IFR clearance that the pilot files and the flight plan with the FAA in the National Aerospace System, and then they contact clearance delivery to be given that same. It's usually the same thing that you filed, unless there was something that made the air traffic control system tweak something in there. Like you filed from A to B to C to D, and B was unavailable as far as a nav aid, so they had to reroute you a little bit. They'll, to make what you asked for happen, then that's why you go and get clearance delivery handed back to you, so you can see if they had to make any changes, because maybe there was a nav aid, 500 miles, 500 miles along your route as you're flying a big long cross country that is out of service, and you didn't know because it just went out of service this morning, and there's no NOTAM about it or anything like that. So, the pilot will contact clearance delivery, usually probably while they're still doing the rest of their post startup sort of ground ops. Then ground control is the controller at an airport that owns all of the surfaces of the airfield, all of the controlled surfaces. That's all the taxiways, all the parking ramps, everything, including the ground vehicle roads that go between parking ramps and stuff like that within that zone, within that airfield, except the runway. So the ground controller owns all of that surface. You can't move an airplane or a vehicle anywhere around on the ground without being in contact with the ground control guy on a radio and getting clearance to move that thing from A to B within the controlled area. With the exception of the runways, the ground controller does not own the runways. The tower controller owns the runway, the ATC tower, and they're on separate frequencies. Now, they're both actually physically located in the tower, and in fact, they're sitting right next to each other. The ground controller is sitting right to the side of the guy who's doing who's working as the tower controller. Those are actual call signs. So, clearance delivery's call sign is clearance delivery. Ground is if we're at, Tampa International Airport, then their call sign is Tampa Ground. If you're at Tampa International, then the tower, when you're ready for takeoff or you're calling to land, is Tampa Tower. So those are standardized call signs for those agencies. The last one is the RAPCON, the Radar Approach Control Facility, which will be a building probably fairly close to the tower, but it doesn't have to be. These are the guys that you see in typical Hollywood movies that are looking at the actual radar scope, and they're in a darkened room, and you always see them chain smoking, which is always makes me laugh. That facility is basically attached to some big powerful radar somewhere on the airfield where they can see out, 40, 50, 60 miles around the airport and see the aircraft. Now, they'll have 3 different call signs that the RAPCON will be operating depending on what that particular controller is doing. So they'll have a departure controller, an arrival controller, and an approach control. In fact, you could have multiple approach controllers, but they'll all have the call sign of, in this case, Tampa approach. So the guy who's working the departure control is everybody right after they take off on the runway from Tower, and Tower hands them off to departure, then they're the ones who are working on getting them sequenced up out of Tampa's airspace and all the way up to 18,000 feet, where they transition into the national aerospace structure where all the airliners are flying, flight level 180 and higher. Arrival is the exact reverse of that. So the Enroute centers get, when the airplanes come down in, they get down below 18,000 and they're coming in within a certain, miles of the arriving airport. Then that's when the center controllers will push them over to the local arrival guy, so Tampa arrival, and they air traffic control them down from that altitude and out range in and funnel them into the arriving airport. And they will either hand them off to Tower if the traffic density is low, if it's someplace that's really high traffic density, or weather is bad, then they will hand them off to an approach controller. An approach controller, it looks just like the arrival controller, except for they're just very, very close to the airfield, and they're really just working on air traffic control and sequencing those aircraft in like the last 5 to 10 miles to the airport. So just getting them down onto final, basically, to get into land. And then everything works in reverse. Once they get from departure, we'll hand them off to Tower. They land. Tower hands them off to ground. Ground, gets them taxied around back to their parking place. And then that's usually it. So we'll kind of follow that from a day in the life of an airline pilot, and so that I can add some visual to these radio sequence and which agencies they're talking about. So for our day in the life of an airline pilot, as far as communications go, we're going to be this airplane right there at the end of this. This airport does not exist, actually. This was I think it's a proposed airport model that an architect made. I don't know if it was ever built anywhere, but I actually just stole this off of their website. Anyway, so we're going to be that airplane right there. And so after your walk around, is everything done? We get in the airplane. Everybody's loaded. You're starting up engines. And the first people we're going to talk to after startup is going to be the ramp control for your actual airline. That's just an operations desk. Okay, and their call sign will be whatever. So if we're Delta 79, if we work for Delta Airlines and our flight today is flight 779, then you'd call, because we work for Delta Airlines, we call Delta's ramp control. They're basically their operations desk, and you'd be Delta ramp, flight 779 engine start words, basically, or and that way if Delta Ops has anything to change to the plan or whatever, that any last second important information they need to pass off to you before you push back from the gate, then they would hand that to you. So of course, most likely nothing, particularly with the addition of data links. If there is any important information, it's probably been data linked straight from their computer into your computer, but they might tell you about it, so you know to double check. And then of course, engines are running. You're going to probably send the co-pilot while you're talking to ramp. The co-pilots might, or vice versa, you might go to clearance delivery while the co-pilot's talking to ramp. There are two of you in the cockpit, so each you can kind of do some of this stuff in parallel, but if not, then you go to clearance delivery and they read you your clearance. And then of course you're going to listen to ATIS before you push back. So you're going to, before we stepped out of the airport building and out to the airplane, we double checked weather, and now you're going to get one last one to hear what the official ATIS is checked, because sometimes weather can change very fast and you have to make decisions on the fly. Decisions like we're not going to go because that's a big airplane killing thunderstorm that just rolled up over the south end of the airport or whatever. Okay, so to taxi out, you're going to then actually talk to the first actual air traffic control person, and that's going to be the ground controller. And of course, their call sign will be whatever the name of the airfield is. If this was Tampa International, it'd be Tampa Ground. So all of those yellow surfaces are owned by that controller, and anything, regardless of whether it's an airplane or a ground vehicle, does not move on there without being in direct radio contact of him. He's up in the tower right beside the tower controller, so he has 360 degrees view, and in this where is my laser pointer? We're going to kill a dog later. In that laser pointer, the tower is right there on this airfield. So he's up there and he's got a 360-degree view around of everything of the entire airfield. He has an unobstructed view. Of course, you're going to taxi out from where you're at under ground control. He's going to tell you, he's going to give you some taxi instructions probably. He'll say and the taxiways are lettered, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, etc. So you'll probably have your airfield diagram if you're not familiar with this place, open on your knee board, of course, or in glass cockpits nowadays. They're all electronic, so they'll just come up on the glass dash. Then, so you'll probably taxi out, you'll head on out, you get out here to the number one position. Number one position being right, the next guy to take off on the runway. You know, if there's airplanes stacked up your hair, then you're not number one, you're in sequence. So that's the terminology. When you get up to number one, then that's where you're going to switch off of ground control and you're going to go to tower. Boop. Why won't it go to the next one? Okay, there we go. All right, so tower actually owns the runways themselves and the airspace around the airport out to 5 nautical mile radius and up from surface up to 5,000 feet AGL. So that tower controller owns that airspace and those however many landing surfaces you have. So in this case, we have 2 runway surfaces, which is actually 4 runways because the runway one way and the runway one way is considered a separate runway from the same piece of concrete but facing the other direction. So landing that way is one runway and landing this way would be considered another runway. So this picture has those 2 red streaks are actually considered 4 runways. Okay, so the tower controller. So then you're going to be there at the end of the runway, and you're going to call the tower, Tampa Tower, your call sign, Tampa Tower Delta 779er number 1. And that's all you're going to say. And then you're going to shut up. And even if he doesn't acknowledge you immediately, because if this is a super busy airport, it could be people on short final, there could be a lot of stuff, and he's going to be talking fast whenever he keys the mic to talk back to you. But, you make that radio call, he may acknowledge you, he may not. And the second he does, he's got you a hole built into the pattern to get you off. He'll tell you that you're clear for takeoff, and that's where you're going to roll out onto the runway, do your last little quick check brakes, check engines, and then shove them up and go take off. Okay, so like I said, off of that airport, he owns that airspace all the way out to 5 nautical miles radius and up from the surface up to 5,000 feet. So when you initially take off, you're still talking theoretically to the tower controller. Now, you're probably not going to actually be saying it. You don't really have anything to say to him other than the fact that he just already, he told you to take off. But at some point, he's going to shove you, radio-wise, he's going to shove you off over to the departure frequency, So, in fact, he may do it early. You may not even be technically out of his airspace. But, of course, you're climbing out at 250 knots. So it doesn't take you very long to cover 5 miles or climb up out of 5,000 feet, particularly in those airliners or a jet fighter either. So when you get over to the departure frequency, so it'd be Tampa departure, Delta 779 or Airborne passing 6,000. So as you're climbing out, now they're going to own airspace out a much farther distance than the tower controller cylinder. That 5 nautical miles and 5,000 feet, surface of 5,000 feet, AGL is a standard. That's called Class D airspace. It used to be called an airport traffic area. It is the airspace that tower owns, and that is standardized across the entire planet. The ARSA could be varying sizes. It's very typical for them, and they look like an upside down wedding cake if you were able to visualize the 3-dimensional space for a Class C airspace, also known as what used to be known as an airport radar service area. So the departure controller and the arrival controller and the approach controller actually own these space out to typically 20 miles and up to about 10,000 feet above the surface for the bottom tier of the wedding cake, and then out to something either 40 miles or maybe even out to 100 miles and up to the bottom of the positive control area, Class A airspace up top at 18,000 feet and up. So that's the top of their wedding cake. If it's a really, really, really big, nasty airports like Los Angeles and Dallas, Fort Worth, and, you know, everything around New York City and Washington, D.C., they might actually have a third one. So like they may have 20 nautical mile, 40 nautical mile, and then another one on top of it that goes out to 100 nautical miles. But they do all stop at the highest that they go up is to 18,000. And so they'll have to have radar coverage to be able to see all of that. And this is the guy, as you talk to departure, he's going to be watching you as you fly out. Of course, you're going to be following your flight plan. So procedurally, you should already be deconflicted from all the other traffic out there, because that's the entire point of the flight plan, is so that I put my flight plan in, you put your flight plan in, and the National Air Control System that the FAA runs double checks and sees that does at any point do the streams cross at the same time, Ghostbusters style, you know, and therefore that's all it's there for, is to prevent a midair collision. So as you're going out, this departure controller is doing that in real time. He's watching your blip and all the other blips and seeing if any of the blips look like they're converging. And then he's going to keep them apart. There's actual computer software in the radar systems too that also do prediction, look at your vector, their vector, and we'll do some prediction, and we'll warn him way early that, hey, this might, 20 miles out there, these two things might get too close to each other. So he can actually prevent bad situations from happening much earlier than that. But he's basically watching it all the way out until you get it out to the edge of his airspace, laterally or vertically. And when he gets out, then he will hand you off to the Enroute controller, assuming you're on an IFR flight plan. So you climb up above 18,000 feet. Now they're going to hand you off to the Enroute controller. And this is the ones that you always see in Hollywood that are called center, and there are FAA Enroute regional centers all the way across the U.S. And actually these things exist all the way around the planet. And they actually are run by the FAA. So this is a government job. So you get up, say this notional airfield we were taking off out of was somewhere in Southern California. Then of course, once we get up there, the departure controller is going to say, Delta 779er contact Los Angeles Center on frequency, blah, 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 blah. And he's going to tell the frequency, and you're going to acknowledge and say good day. He's going to say good day. You're going to change your radio, and you're going to contact Los Angeles Center, Delta 779er with you, passing flight level 200 for flight level 350. And he's just going to probably say something like, Delta 779er, good day, cleared, present position, on course, climb and maintains, flight level 350. And then you're going to continue on your way. When you get to that edge of his airspace between, say, in this case, we're showing like Los Angeles and Albuquerque Center, then he's going to say Delta 779er contact Albuquerque Center on channel, 132.7. You're going to say copy 132.7 Albuquerque Center. Thank you. Good day. And then you're going to change your radio. You're going to wait a few minutes just to make sure that, wait a few seconds as you come onto the new frequency, make sure you're not interrupting a conversation that's coming on. And then you're going to check in with Albuquerque Center, Delta 779er with you, flight level 350. And they're going to say, Delta 779er, Albuquerque Center, good day. And and then he's probably not going to talk to you. If he doesn't have any changes, you're driving from A to B out across the country up at altitude on the radio sounds very boring, because it is. Unless he has a reason to change your route. Once you get up here, all the work is done. Getting in and out of the airports are super busy on the radio, but once you get up, it's very, you could drive for an hour driving across Albuquerque's airspace, and you probably won't hear him talk to you again until you get to the point where he says, Delta 779er contact Fort Worth Center on 126.8. 126.8, Delta 779er, good day. Good day. And you get handed off to the Fort Worth controller. Wash, rinse, repeat across whatever airspaces you need to go to until you get to arrival. And then everything just happens in reverse. So you get to the airport of intended landing and the center, and you start the descent with center. And when you get coming out below 18,000 and into the upside down wedding cake airport radar service area of the airport of intended landing, then they push you to the arrival controller. So, like I said, the Tampa arrival, Delta 779er with you, passing flight level 180. Request straight in, full stop. Okay, copy. So you can tell arrival kind of what you're planning to do when you get to the airfield. Even though you're still out here at 100 miles out, but you're they'll start doing that whole thing of getting you sequenced with all of the other airplanes that are coming in. As you continue on descending, if the traffic was low, like maybe it's middle of the night and there's not as much air traffic, the arrival and the approach control guy could be the same guy. He may just keep you on this frequency and says, hey, stay with me until I push you to tower. Or if it's super busy and or it's got shitty weather and you're going to have to do an instrument approach to penetrate, then they're going to push you off to an approach controller. And the approach controller is going to be just dedicated to that one runway. He's going to be getting you from probably out here somewhere at 20 miles where the arrival controller handed you off to him. You're going to contact him in, and then they're going to help guide you down through the weather, which is really more sequencing because the jets have all of their own internal instrumentation that'll get them through the weather just fine. They don't really need the wrap content, like guide you as far as like help navigate your jet. But what he is doing is he's got a hell of a lot better radar system than even fighter jets have, as far as distance and volume that he can see. And it's tuned to go through the weather, where there's some things that with like even fighter jet radars that are necessarily designed, they're not designed necessarily to combat weather. They're designed to combat other airplanes. So, he's actually just sequencing and make sure you guys, in the clouds, we don't accidentally run two airplanes together, and then get you down to where you can get your system will get you the rest of the way in down to landing. So like I said, he may hold on to you himself if it's kind of a quiet night and there's not a whole bunch of people and the weather's good. If not, he's going to hand you off to approach so that they're dividing up and not having too many people on the same frequency, too many people in the same piece of sky, to get these airplanes down safely. And then, of course, as you come in, when you get within 5 miles and under 5,000 feet, in other words, you pop into there, he's going to push you over to tower. Hopefully you're down through the weather at this point, and tower's going to clear you to land. Tampa Tower, Delta 779er, short final, gear down, full stop. And they're going to say, here, cleared to land, runway, blah, 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 blah. You're going to repeat that back, and then you're going to land safely. And then it's just the reverse. When you come rolling out, you land, get slowed down, get off on the next taxiway that you managed to get off on. The second you get off the runway, you got sort of that length of taxiway to get your butt over onto ground frequency, because you're now in grounds controlled space, and tell him, hey, Delta 779er, clear of runway, blah, 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 at taxiway, blah, 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 request taxi back to ramp. And they'll say, okay, yeah, taxi via taxiway Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, da 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 da, and he'll give you your taxi routing to get you back in to park. And then when you get in park, you go back to your Delta ramp and say, hey, this is us, we're arrived. This is any, so you pass them any maintenance problems with the jet, etc. Blah 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 blah. Wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. Okay, so how is this different from a military pilot? The answer is it's not. For that same type of flight, if you're going to fly from A to B, we're just driving from A to B. This isn't a combat mission. This is the same sort of, we're flying IFR from, we're taking off out of Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. We're going to fly out to Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada because we're going to go out for 2 weeks of red flag exercise. Everything is the same with one tiny exception, and that's in where the airline's operations desks are called ramp. We have our squadron operations desk, which basically does the exact same thing, but we call it your squadron's name, and their call sign is ops. So if we were in this one I just said about Shaw Air Force Base, there's actually 3 squadrons there. But if we were the Tigers, then it'd be Tiger Ops, for example. Okay, so how do we roleplay Citizen Star Citizen? That was a very complicated. It's a very complicated system because it has to be with the amount of volume of air traffic that we have over the United States and pretty much the rest of the developed world. As far as Europe is just as nasty air in density, a little nastier actually. Japan is a little nastier actually, just because of the population density. They have a lot of air traffic in a much smaller space. America has a very, very big benefit of having so much land area. But we also fly the most number of airplanes of anybody on the planet. So it's very complicated, and most of that we can just get rid of for the sake of simplicity, ease of use, all that sort of stuff. Plus, it's not built into the game. The really only air traffic control that exists in the game at this instant, the way I described it, was really the tower controller. So when you go into your mobiGlas to request takeoff or to request landing, that's basically the Star Citizen equivalent of making that call to tower for number 1 ready for takeoff, or for, hey, I'm short final, gear down, full stop, looking to land, kind of a thing. So that exists as it is. They could implement this one in yellow. They could implement ATIS. That would not actually, in my opinion, I don't think implementing an ATIS system would be difficult. They've put in weather, so it actually would be relevant. If they're going to put in weather particularly nasty enough to be a problem to be an aviation hazard, I don't know if they're not. If it kind of depends. If they're gonna put weather in kind of like it is now, where it's really not any worse than to be sort of an annoyance, and otherwise it's there to be visually pretty, but is not really a hazard to aviation, then this would be, ATIS would be sort of unnecessary. But if they want to do any sort of realism to this and actually make weather potentially dangerous, and every once in a while have a serious storm roll in over New Babbage, a serious blizzard rolling in over New Babbage, that's like, dude, you try flying in here or taking off out of here right now, you're taking your life into your hands. Then yeah, they could very easily make an automated system that looks at the weather system of what's happening and what's predicted to happen in a short distance, and just make a system that builds itself procedurally into a 20-second long weather, quickie weather report. And they could even cut out a lot of the stuff that the real world has in its package of information in a single ATIS broadcast. They could even abbreviate that quite a bit too, and make it very easy to do that. So it doesn't exist. They could, if they wanted to. The green one, Ops / Talking to Mad Dog, that's actually, we actually do play with that sometimes now. And that is only dependent on what we're doing as an org, as far as an operations. In your day-to-day flying and goofing off in Star Citizen, I would not be role-playing talking to Ops or Mad Dog, talking to Mad Dog. But you do need to understand who Mad Dog is and how you use him and or her when we do play with a Mad Dog, with a mission director on ground. So that's why it's in green, because that'll be a person, which means you don't have to worry about Star Citizen adding that. We do that ourselves, and we do it already, so we actually have experience. The blue ones down here, departure and arrival / and or approach controls. You could role-play this every day. When you take off or when you're coming into land, you could just make a single radio call to them and expect not to get an answer, because it doesn't exist in the Star Citizen, the video game, not to be confused with Star Citizen, the flamethrower. So after you call tower on your mobiGlas, you can even practice that radio call in roleplay. Take off, and once you're kind of climbing out, like maybe after if it's Area 18 or Lorville, once you're out those landing splines or exit splines, tunnel, in other words, you come out the tunnel, then just make a radio call in the blind. I would do it, if you turn in your in-game proximity chant, I would actually make that radio call out across the Star Citizen in-game radio and go, Riker departure, Killer 1, Airborne passing 5,000. Just something simple like that. That sounds like a departure call. And same thing coming in. You can just do that on your own. So the blues you can do right now, because you don't really need to be answered. It's other than 9 times out of 10, the departure and arrival controller is just going to acknowledge that they heard you, if nothing's changed in the flight plan and everything's kind of clear out ahead of you. So that's kind of how we could role play some ATC stuff without too much overhead on us. The only overhead we'd ever have to worry about is obviously when we already do, when we're running an operation or an exercise. And we already have a few folks who've done sort of Mad Dog duties, and we actually are building a training program for that so that people kind of understand a little bit better of what a mission director is and does and how it works. Whew, okay. So in your role play, then remember the standard comms on talking on a radio in aviation. Kind of goes under a standard. There's a very simple standard template that we kind of teach new folks when they're flying. It's basically the agency that you're talking to, who you are, where you are, and what you want. So who am I calling? That's kind of the first. So it's, Tampa ground, Delta 779er, gate 23, request taxi for takeoff. So it's kind of a 4-part thing. And some of those can be amended or abbreviated depending on the situation. And that just kind of comes with some experience and understanding of that part's obvious. So I don't need to say it. But that's the format you can use. So obviously, if you're talking to if you're going to call Mad Dog, Mad Dog is almost always a standard call. Whenever you're going to call Mad Dog, it's always Mad Dog Killer 1 words. The words just means you're asking for, has anything changed from when we stepped out of ops, and now that we've got the spacecraft started, is there anything different with the mission that you need to talk to us? And he'll almost always say words are standard, launch the fleet, which means words are standard, aka nothing's changed, and launch the fleet, go get it done. So then of course tower, if you're going to not only hit the mobiGlas button, but if you're actually going to simulate the radio call or role play the radio call, it would be Lorville Tower or Tisa Tower, Killer 1, Hangar 3, number 1. You can say all of that while you're waiting for those incredibly slow doors to freaking roll open. As you climb out, you go out the exit tunnel now in Alpha 310s, Tango and whatever comes in the future, and then make your departure call. Lorville departure, Killer 1 Airborne passing 5,000. You fly to wherever you're going. Say you're going over to ArcCorp. You fly over there. You get there as you're descending down. When it first says contact ATC for landing, that's when I would make the fake radio call of, airfield of Riker arrival, Killer 1 in the descent passing 7,000, as you go down. They give you now I'm actually there when I make the arrival call. I would probably hit my mobiGlas to make the call for landing, because you got to do that to get the entry splines down through their no-fly zone. Then I'd fly through there and it'll already show you where your landing spot is. But then just as a role play, I would go ahead and make the tower call once I'm down through the splines and say, all right, say Riker Tower, Killer 1, base gear down, full stop, or base gear stop. The down and full part can be amended or abbreviated. Questions? Tap dancing for a few seconds. See if there's anybody got any questions. Probably not. Okay. That should be long enough. This wraps up this installment of Academics with Foghorn. I hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you have any questions I didn't answer, feel free to contact me via email, Discord, Spectrum, or of course the comment section below for those that are watching at a later time. And I will answer to the best of my ability and as quickly as I see it. Member or visitor alike, please hit those follows and subscribes as appropriate, and leave us a comment, as we really do read all the feedback and it helps us as we strive to improve our content. If you'd like to find out more information, you can find it on our wonderful website, aurorarepublic.space, or on Spectrum itself at robertspaceindustriescom/org/aurorarep. And I will see you next time. This is Foghorn signing off, wishing you a very pleasant remainder of your morning, afternoon, and or evening.